good is that we have model right here, so once they have extra people, they can do it like that.
They're gone already.
Where?
Now we took them this way.
To the third floor, yes.
Your guy, right? Mauritius.
Telling me it's there that pretty soon one that's circle nice. They're probably going to hold down there and everything down through. So we're right after. I'll take it. Don't crew down there before that's the thing.
actually very clear.
Thank you.
I don't know where you are.
I mean, I asked Jordan for 20 minutes ago, said that
and
she's
the meeting
working
is not.
hard
Now
for
it's
him
finished.
as whatever. But
Where
as far
are
as being like
where
an
are you?
EA
Why
and
did
being
the
a
top of the game? I don't know what happened.
The 10th plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Stevo Pendarovsky, President of the Republic of North Macedonia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Stevo Pendarovsky, President of the Republic of North Macedonia, and invite him to address the Assembly.
Почитуван председател на Генералното собрание,
Honorable President of the General
почитувани
Assembly,
шефови на држави и влади, почитуван генерален секретар, дами и господа. Ми причинува особена чест и задоволство во име на граѓаните на Република Северна Македонија да се обратам од говорницата на Обединетите нации во рамки на генералната дебата на ова Генерално собрание. Дозволете ми на почетокот да му посакам успех и на неговата екселенција Денис Френсис, председателот на 78-то Генерално собрание на Обединетите нации. Секоја година во овој период очите на светот се вперени кон најголемиот собир, на кој политичките лидери на нациите ги изложуваат своите визии за иднината. Ова година фокусот врз сите нас е можеби поголем од кога било претходно, а причината е во поразителниот факт дека најмал заеднички именител на емоционалната состојба на човештвото денес е стравот. Стравот од војни, од глад и сиромаштија, од пандемии, од еколошки катаклизми, страв за иднината на нашите најблиски. Ноторен факт е дека меѓународниот поредок е темелно разнишан на повеќе точки во светот. Агресијата на Руската Федерација врз Украина продолжува со несмалена жестокост, што е флагрантно кршење на повелбата на Обединетите нации и на принципите на меѓународното право во континуитет. Станува збор за најголемата безбедносна криза по Втората светска војна со глобални последици кои повеќе или помалку се чувствуваат на сите континенти. Со секој изминат ден се зголемуваат страдањата на украинскиот народ, се уништуваат материјални добра и расте опасноста од ескалација. Најостро ја осудуваме агресијата врз Украина, како што тоа го направија и огромен број членки на нашата организација. Се залагаме за безусловно повлекување на руските окупаторски трупи и за почитување на украинскиот суверенитет и територијален интегритет во рамки на незините меѓународно признаени граници. Повелбата на Светската асамблеја во таа смисла е кристално јасна. Сите отворени прашања, било каде во светот, mora da se rešava po miren pad, со преговори и диалог, со одрекување на употребата на сила. Војната во Украина е најеклатантен, но за жал не е единствен пример за заканите по светскиот мир и безбедност. Планетарната безбедносна архитектура, во чија основа е токму оваа организација, е посебно разнишена кога држава, постојана членка на Советот за безбедност на Обединетите нации, илегално напаѓа земја членка на истата организација. Не случајно, неодамна, генералниот секретар предупреди дека ризикот од нуклеарна катастрофа денес е на највисоко ниво по завршување на студената војна. Овој аларм од највисокото ниво на организацијата треба да биде повик до секој разумен политички лидер за глобална мобилизација за зачувување на мирот, без сомнение најголемата вредност на човештвото. Последен час е да замолкнат барабаните на војната, да се почитува повелбата на Обединетите нации, тргнувајќи од независноста, суверенитетот и територијалниот интегритет на државите како темелен принцип и главен резон за постоење на светската организација. Почитувани колеги, мирот е во основата на се, меѓутоа светот е соочен со предизвици од различен формат и за нивно решавање не е доволно да има само мир меѓу државите, туку и меѓусебна доверба и соработка. Јасно е дека довербата, градена со децении, во најголем дел токму во оваа зграда, е сериозно нарушена и дека ќе ни треба време, напори и пред се политичка волја за повторно да ја воспоставиме. Независно од сите разлики што постојат меѓу нас, политички, економски или културолошки, ние мора да действуваме заедно во интерес на мирот, стабилноста и просперитетот на сегашните и идни генерации. Алтернативите на диалогот меѓу нациите се застрашувачки, а секое одлоговлекување повторно ќе не соочи со истата закана, со тоа што цената што тогаш ќе треба да ја платиме ќе биде далеку повисока. Дами и господа, војната во Украина креира состојба на општа непредвидливост и кризи кои меѓусебно се поттикнуваат, особено во снабдувањето со храна и енергенти. Недостатокот од храна ги загрозува најсиромашните и се заканува во многу делови од светот да предизвика хуманитарни катастрофи со незабележани магнитуди. Даваме целосна поддршка на напорите на генералниот секретар за враќање во сила на договорот за извоз на украинско жито преку Црното море, затоа што е целосно неприфатливо храната и енергијата да се користат како оружје за остварување на воени или политички цели. Паралелно со напорите за мирно разрешување на конфликтите, неопходно е удвојување на напорите за реализација на милениумските развојни цели 2030-та. Самитот, одржан пред неколку денови во рамките на овогодинешната генерална дебата, е чекор во вистинска насока, но круцијално е зборовите да бидат преточени во дела. Неразбирливо е во третата деценија на 21. век милиони луѓе да немаат пристап до елементарните човекови потреби. Каков ќе биде нашиот авторитет како политички лидери кога зборуваме за демократија, за човекови права и просперитет, доколку во исто време милиони луѓе немаат пристап до вода за пиење, до храна или до образование. Почитувани, глобалната солидарност не е нова идеја или концепт кој треба посебно да се елаборира. Доаѓам од Скопје, главниот град на Северна Македонија, кој пред точно 60 години беше погоден од катастрофален земјотрес. Скопје се крена од пепелта благодарение помеѓу останатото и на глобалната солидарност. Ние научивме на потешкиот начин што значи подадена рака во неволја. Катастрофалниот земјотрес во Турција во февруари оваа година не натера повторно да се навратиме на суштината на хуманизмот. Ранливоста пред природните катастрофи, но и исконската потреба на човекот да им помогне на послабите и на страданите. Никој од нас не знае што носи утрешниот ден, но знаеме дека со сите предизвици ќе се соочиме далеку поефикасно доколку ги користиме механизмите кои веќе ги имаме изградено. На таа линија потребно е далеку порешително да ги адресираме проблемите на климатските промени. Тие промени не препознаваат и не признаваат граници, za efikasen odgovor je apsolutno kritična zajednička akcija. Regionotna jugoistočna Evropa, od koje doađam, se suočava sa dosega nepoznati fenomeni. Така наречените суперклеточни луњи, кои се речиси на границата на торнада, се директна последица на климатските промени. Глобалното затоплување, како што вели генералниот секретар, веќе преминува во глобално вриење. Без сомнение, светот е исправен пред екзистенцијален предизвик, а единствениот успешен против одговор е можен само ако сите се обединиме врз една единствена платформа. Неопходните инструменти, како што е климатскиот пакт за солидарност, преку кој развиените обезбедуваат финансиска и техничка помош за економиите во развој, се веќе поставени. Правична транзиција кон зелена економија е возможна, но само со нивна соодветна примена. Според забрзаната агенда за климатска акција, развиените земји би требало не само да достигнат нето нула емисии до 2040-та, туку и да ги одржат ветувањата кон земјите во развој со дуплирање на ресурсите за адаптација и на дополнување на зелениот климатски фонд. Почитувани екселенции, најголемите закани на денешното време, геополитичките турбуленции, војните, тероризмот, климатските промени или масовните мигрантски бранови се случуваат во период кога меѓународните организации и целиот мултилатерален систем минуваат низ криза на идентитетот или функционалноста, а најчесто и низ двете. Единствениот реален одговор може да биде само обновен и зајакнат мултилатерализам кој ќе ги уважува потребите на секоја држава поединечно, но ќе нуди и јасна визија за големата слика за работите што не поврзуваат, за општото добро. Не постои посоодветно место за тој заеднички потват од Обединетите нации. Ургентна потреба на човештвото денес е враќање на предвидливоста, на раното предупредување и превенцијата во меѓународните односи. Јасно е дека предуслов за тоа се внатрешни реформи на системот на Обединети нации со почитување на принципите на поголема репрезентативност и инклузивност заради рефлектирање на реалностите на денешниот свет. При тоа е потребно етаблирање на механизми за подобра функционалност, но во исто време и за редуцирање на опциите за парализа на организацијата. И во тој контекст даваме целосна поддршка за одржување на министерскиот состанок како подготовка на самитот на едината кој ќе се одржи во 2024-та. Се разбира, останува потребата од решавање на старите проблеми со паралелно адресирање на новите предизвици, иако некои од нив, како лажните вести и сајбер заканите, се веќе дел од нашите животи. Некои други пак, иако се од понов датум, како вештачката интелигенција, например, веќе предизвикуваат крупни промени во нашите животи. Никој не треба да има сомнеш дека без заеднички пакт за иднината, ниту една земја или група на држави нема самата да понуди и имплементира одговори на овие предизвици. Почитувани екселенции и драги пријатели, од првиот ден на нашата независност, пред повеќе од 30 години, мојата земја на најдобар можен начин ја манифестираше својата приврзеност кон принципите на мирот, продлабочената регионална соработка и решавање на отворените прашања по пат на диалог. Од 91-та отворивме процес на внатрешно демократско созревање преку афирмација на правата на етничките заедници до највисок можен степен и негување на културата на диалог при решавање на проблемите на внатрешен план, но и во односите со соседите. Го прифативме компромисот како начин на решавање на проблемите, не како израз на слабост, туку напротив, како израз на самодоверба дека сме способни да ги заштитиме собствените интереси без да ги повредиме интересите на останатите. Почитувајќи ги принципите во кои самите веруваме, продолжуваме да даваме активен придонес кон мирот, стабилноста, демократските вредности, одржливиот развој и економскиот просперитет. Оваа година председаваме со ОПСЕ, најголемата регионална безбедносна организација, во време исполнето со предизвици без преседан, но и во такви услови настојуваме да ја задржиме релевантноста на организацијата, тргнувајќи од темелните принципи од повелбата на ЮН и завршниот акт од Хелсинки. Остануваме меѓу најголемите промотори и на регионалната соработка во Југоисточна Европа, настојувајќи истовремено да ги исполниме критериумите за членство во Европската Унија не подоцна од 2030-та. Кај нас не постои дилема дека јакнењето на демократските институции во континуитет со загарантирана рамноправност на сите граѓани е единствениот можен пат до поголема кохезија во едно мултиетничко општество. Почитувани колеги, на почетокот споменав дека стравот од иднината е веројатно најдоминантното чувство во светот денес. Меѓутоа, тоа не смее да биде прифатено како нормална состојба. Пред нас, политичките лидери овде собрани, стои обврската, тоа чувство на страв, да го замениме со надеж и верба за поправеден свет. Предуслов за тоа е да постигнеме без одложување еден обновен договор за почитување на темелните вредности и хуманите идеали, поради кој и беше основана ова организација пред 78 години. И благодарам на вниманието.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of North Macedonia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. We shall now continue with the general debate. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the State of Israel. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, over 3 millennia ago, our great leader Moses addressed the people of Israel as they were about to enter the Promised Land. He said they would find there 2 mountains facing one another. Mount Gerizim, the site on which a great blessing would be proclaimed, and Mount Ebal, the site of a great curse. Moses said that the people's fate would be determined by the choice they made between the blessing and the curse. That same choice has echoed down the ages, not just for the people of Israel, but for all humanity. We face such a choice today. It will determine whether we enjoy the blessings of a historic peace, of boundless prosperity and hope, or suffer the curse of a horrific war, of terrorism and despair. When I last spoke at this podium 5 years ago, I warned about the tyrants of Tehran. They've been nothing but a curse to their own people, to our region, to the entire world. But at that time, I also spoke about a great blessing that I could see on the horizon. Here's what I said, quote, "The common thread of Iran has brought Israel and many Arab states closer than ever before, in a friendship that I have not seen in my lifetime." I said the day would soon arrive when Israel would be able to expand peace beyond Egypt and Jordan to other Arab neighbors, end quote. Now, in countless meetings with world leaders, I made the case that Israel and the Arab states shared many common interests, and that I believed that these many common interests could facilitate a breakthrough for a broader peace in our region. Thank you. Well, you applaud now. But at the time, many dismissed my optimism as wishful thinking. Their pessimism was based on a quarter century of good intentions and failed peacemaking. And why was this? Why were these good intentions? Why did they always meet failure? Because they were based on one false idea, that unless we first concluded a peace agreement with the Palestinians, no other Arab state would normalize its relations with Israel. I've long sought to make peace with the Palestinians, but I also believed that we must not give the Palestinians a veto over new peace treaties with Arab states. The Palestinians could greatly benefit from a broader peace. They should be part of that process, but they should not have a veto over the process. And I also believe that making peace with more Arab states would actually increase the prospects of making peace between Israel and the Palestinians. See, the Palestinians are only 2% of the Arab world. As long as they believe that the other 90% will remain in a warlike state with Israel, that larger mass, that larger Arab world could eventually choke, dissolve, and destroy the Jewish state. So when the Palestinians see that most of the Arab world has reconciled itself to the Jewish state, they too will be more likely to abandon the fantasy of destroying Israel and finally embrace a path of genuine peace with it. Now, for years, my approach to peace was rejected by the so-called experts. Well, they were wrong. Under their approach, we didn't forge a single peace treaty for a quarter century. Yet in 2020, under the approach that I advocated, we tried something different. And in no time, we achieved an amazing breakthrough. We achieved 4 peace treaties working with the United States. Israel forged 4 peace treaties in 4 months with 4 Arab countries: the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. The Abraham Accords were a pivot of history. And today, we all see the blessings of those accords. Trade and investment with our new peace partners are booming. Our nations cooperate in commerce, energy, water, agriculture, medicine, climate, and many, many other fields. Close to 1 million Israelis have visited the United Arab Emirates in the past 3 years. Every day, Israelis save time and money by doing something they couldn't do for 70 years. They fly over the Arabian Peninsula to destinations in the Gulf, India, the Far East, Australia. The Abraham Accords ushered in another dramatic change. It brought Arabs and Jews closer together. We see it in the frequent Jewish weddings in Dubai, in the dedication of a Torah school in a synagogue in Bahrain, in the visitors flocking to the Museum of Moroccan Judaism in Casablanca. We see it in lessons that are given to Arab students about the Holocaust in the UAE. There's no question. The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace. But I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Such a peace will go a long way to ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. It will encourage other Arab states to normalize their relations with Israel. It will enhance the prospects of peace with the Palestinians. It will encourage a broader reconciliation between Judaism and Islam, between Jerusalem and Mecca, between the descendants of Isaac and the descendants of Ishmael. All these All these are tremendous blessings. 2 weeks ago, we saw another blessing already in sight. In the G20 conference, President Biden, Prime Minister Modi, and European and Arab leaders announced plans for a visionary corridor that will stretch across the Arabian Peninsula and Israel. It will connect India to Europe with maritime links, rail links, energy pipelines, fiber optic cables. This corridor will bypass maritime checkpoints, or choke points rather, and dramatically lower the costs of goods, communication, and energy for over 2 billion people. What a historic change for my country. You see, the land of Israel is situated in the crossroads between Africa, Asia, and Europe. And for centuries, my country was repeatedly invaded by empires passing through it in their campaigns of plunder and conquest elsewhere. But today, as we tear down the walls of enmity, Israel can become a bridge of peace and prosperity between these continents. Peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia will truly create a new Middle East. To understand the magnitude of the transformation that we seek to advance, let me show you a map of the Middle East in 1948, the year Israel was established. Here's Israel in 1948. It's a tiny country, isolated, surrounded by a hostile Arab world. In our first 70 years, we made peace with Egypt and Jordan, and then in 2020, we made the Abraham Accords, peace with another 4 Arab states. Now look at what happens when we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The whole Middle East changes. We tear down the walls of enmity. We bring the possibility of prosperity and peace to this entire region, but we do something else. You know, a few years ago, I stood here with a red marker to show the curse, a great curse, the curse of a nuclear Iran. But today I bring this marker to show a great blessing, the blessing of a new Middle East between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and our other neighbors. We will not only bring down barriers between Israel and our neighbors, we'll build a new corridor of peace and prosperity that connects Asia through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, to Europe. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change, another pivot of history. Now, as the circle of peace expands, I believe that a real path towards a genuine peace with our Palestinian neighbors can finally be achieved. But there's a caveat. It has to be said here, forcefully. Peace can only be achieved if it is based on truth. It cannot be based on lies. It cannot be based on endless vilification of the Jewish people. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas must stop spreading the horrible anti-Semitic conspiracies against the Jewish people and the Jewish state. I mean, he recently said that Hitler wasn't an anti-Semite. You can't make this up. But he did. He said that. And the Palestinian Authority must stop glorifying terrorists. They must stop its ghoulish pay-to-slay policy of giving money to Palestinian terrorists for the murder of Jews. This is all outrageous. It must stop for peace to prevail. And anti-Semitism must be rejected wherever it appears, whether on the left or on the right, whether in the halls of universities or in the halls of the United Nations. For peace to prevail, the Palestinians must stop spewing Jew hatred, finally reconcile themselves to the Jewish state. By that I mean not only to the existence of the Jewish state, but to the right of the Jewish people to have a state of their own in their historic homeland, the land of Israel. And let me tell you, the people of Israel yearn for such a peace. I yearn for such a peace. As a young soldier over half a century ago, my comrades and I in Israel's Special Forces faced mortal dangers on many fronts, on many battlefields, from the warm waters of the Suez Canal to the frozen slopes of Mount Hermon, from the banks of the Jordan River to the tarmac of Beirut Airport. These experiences and other experiences taught me the cost of war. A fellow soldier was killed next to me. Another died in my arms. I buried my older brother. Those who have personally suffered the curse of war can best appreciate the blessings of peace. Now, there are many hurdles on the path to peace. There are many hurdles on the extraordinary path to peace that I've just described. But I'm committed to doing everything I can to overcome these hurdles, to forge a better future for Israel and all of our peoples, all the peoples in our region. 2 days ago, I discussed this vision of peace with President Biden. We share the same optimism for what can be achieved. And I deeply appreciate his commitment to seize this historic opportunity. The United States of America is indispensable in this effort. And just as we achieved the Abraham Accords with the leadership of President Trump, I believe we can achieve peace with Saudi Arabia with the leadership of President Biden. Working together with the leadership of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, we can shape a future of great blessings for all our peoples. Now, you know, ladies and gentlemen, you know there's a fly in this ointment, because rest assured, the fanatics ruling Iran will do everything they can to thwart this historic peace. Iran continues to spend billions to arm its terror proxies. It continues to extend its terror tentacles in the Middle East, Europe, Asia, South America, even North America. They even tried to assassinate the Secretary of State of the United States of America. They even tried to assassinate the National Security Advisor of the United States of America. This tells you all you need to know about Iran's murderous intentions and Iran's murderous nature. Iran continues to threaten international shipping lanes, hold foreign nationals for ransom, and engage in nuclear blackmail. Over the past year, its murderous goons have killed hundreds and arrested thousands of Iran's brave citizens. Iran's drones and missile program threaten Israel and our Arab neighbors, and Iran's drones have brought and bring death and destruction to innocent people in the Ukraine. Yet the regime's aggression is largely met by indifference in the international community. 8 years ago, the Western powers promised that if Iran violated the nuclear deal, the sanctions would be snapped back. Well, Iran is violating the deal, but the sanctions have not been snapped back. To stop Iran's nuclear ambitions, this policy must change. Sanctions must be snapped back. And above all, Iran must face a credible nuclear threat. As long as I'm Prime Minister of Israel, I will do everything in my power to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Equally, we should support the brave women and men of Iran who despise the regime, who yearn for freedom, who've gone out bravely on the sidewalks of Tehran and Iran's other cities and faced death. It is the people of Iran, not their oppressors, who are our real partners for a better future. Ladies and gentlemen, whether our future will prove to be a blessing or a curse will also depend on how we address perhaps the most consequential development of our time, the rise of artificial intelligence. The AI revolution is progressing at lightning speed. It took centuries for humanity to adapt to the agricultural revolution. It took decades to adapt to the industrial revolution. We may have but a few years to adapt to the AI revolution. The perils are great, and they are before us. The disruption of democracy, the manipulation of minds, the decimation of jobs, the proliferation of crime, and the hacking of all the systems that facilitate modern life. Yet even more disturbing is the potential eruption of AI-driven wars that could achieve an unimaginable scale. And behind this perhaps looms an even greater threat, once the stuff of science fiction, that self-taught machines could eventually control humans instead of the other way around. The world's leading nations, however competitive, must address these dangers. We must do so quickly, and we must do so together. We must ensure that the promise of an AI utopia does not turn into an AI dystopia. We have so much to gain. Imagine the blessings of finally cracking the genetic code, extending human life by decades, and dramatically reducing the ravages of old age. Imagine healthcare tailored to each individual's genetic composition, and predictive medicine that prevents diseases long before they occur. Imagine robots helping to care for the elderly. Imagine the end of traffic jams with self-driving vehicles on the ground, below the ground, and in the air. Imagine personalized education that cultivates each person's full potential throughout their lifetime. Imagine a world with boundless clean energy and natural resources for all nations. Imagine precision agriculture and automated factories that yield food and goods in an abundance that ends hunger and want. I know this sounds like a John Lennon song, but it could all happen. Imagine that we could achieve the end of scarcity, something that eluded humanity for all history. It's all within our reach. And here's something else within our reach. With AI, we can explore the heavens as never before and extend humanity beyond our blue planet. For good or bad, the developments of AI will be spearheaded by a handful of nations, and my country, Israel, is already among them. Just as Israel's technological revolution provided the world with breathtaking innovations, I'm confident that AI developed by Israel will once again help all humanity. I call upon world leaders to come together to shape the great changes before us, but to do so in a responsible and ethical way. Our goal must be to ensure that AI brings more freedom and not less, prevents wars instead of starting them, and ensures that people live longer, healthier, more productive, and peaceful lives. It's within our reach. And as we harness the powers of AI, let us always remember the irreplaceable value of human intuition and wisdom. Let us cherish and preserve the human capacity for empathy, which no machine can replace. Thousands of years ago, Moses presented the children of Israel with a timeless and universal choice. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. May we choose wisely between the curse and the blessing that stand before us this day. Let us harness our resolve and our courage to stop the curse of a nuclear Iran and roll back its fanaticism and aggression. Let us bring forth the blessings of a new Middle East that will transform lands once ridden with conflict and chaos into fields of prosperity and peace. And may we avoid the perils of AI by combining the forces of human and machine intelligence to usher in a brilliant future for our world in our time and for all time. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the State of Israel for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Pravin Kumar Jugnauth, Prime Minister, Minister for Defense, Home Affairs and External Communications, Minister for Rodriguez, Outer Islands and Territorial Integrity of the Republic of Mauritius. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Pravin Kumar Jugnauth, Prime Minister, Minister for Defense, Home Affairs and External Communications, Minister for Rodriguez, Outer Islands and Territorial Integrity of the Republic of Mauritius. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis, President of the General Assembly, Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, heads of states and heads of government, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good morning. Mr. President, may I begin by congratulating you on your election as President of the 78th session of the General Assembly. I also wish to convey my appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Sabo Korosi for his sterling leadership of the 77th session of the General Assembly. United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, also deserves our gratitude for his inspiring and commendable initiatives in furthering the objectives of our organization. Mr. President, it is a matter of great pride to see a fellow islander preside over the proceedings of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, especially at a time when the world is faced with a myriad of interlocking challenges amidst conflicts, climate chaos, inequality, and hunger. Let me assure you, Mr. President, of the commitment of Mauritius to the principles that the United Nations stands for, and the hopes and aspirations that we all have in the United Nations. Mauritius is firmly committed to fulfilling its responsibilities as a member of the United Nations. Let me also seize this opportunity to express to the governments and peoples of the Kingdom of Morocco and the State of Libya our solidarity at this tragic moment. Mr. President, your theme this year could not be more timely. It is about how we can together restore confidence in our shared future, confidence between people and leaders, confidence in our institutions and amongst countries. Unless we urgently begin to rebuild this trust, it will prove impossible to tackle the challenges we have to face. No country, no matter how powerful or wealthy, can succeed in tackling current challenges on its own. Our fate and fortunes have never been so closely linked. Indeed, the world is at a critical inflection point as it faces unprecedented and interlocking crises, with the multilateral system being under greater strain. The ICT revolution has increased connections and complexities to our daily lives, and the list of problems is daunting. From a lingering COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, declining biodiversity, food and energy insecurity, cybercrime, terrorism, large-scale migration, gender inequality, a general pushback against human rights, to inadequate development financing, increasing debt burdens, and geopolitical crises. Our national borders are no match for these challenges. Effective multilateral response is the only way to address geopolitical challenges and rescue our common agenda. We have to give a new direction to multilateralism and to the United Nations. We need to restore trust in multilateralism. As leaders of the world, we should lead by example, show our unwavering commitment, and honor the promises made. More importantly, we need to uphold fairness and justice. In this regard, Mr. President, finding consensus on crucial priorities like poverty eradication, renewable energy, education, and women empowerment is paramount. The Sustainable Development Goals serve as our guiding compass on this journey. And in a world marred by inequalities, our commitment to uplift the marginalized and empower the vulnerable must remain steadfast. We must ensure inclusivity where every individual feels safe and secure. Our society's strength lies in its diversity. An efficient education system is vital in order to achieve such inclusivity. Everyone will need to possess an evolving pool of knowledge, skills, and capacities, or else we will have a two-speed world, deepening inequalities and exacerbating global instability. We need to build an integrated system of lifelong learning and ensure equity, access, and inclusion in relevant curricula. We should work together towards harnessing digital tools and increase investment in education so that it is recognized as a global public good. The surge in health challenges, from non-communicable diseases to global pandemics like COVID-19, underscores the importance of global unity. By fostering cooperation, sharing resources and expertise, we can ensure universal access to highest standard of health care in order to protect the vulnerable and strengthen our global resilience. Mr. President, scaled-up action to reduce emissions to align with goals set forth in the Paris Agreement is becoming imperative. Even within the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, SIDS are facing an existential threat. Exceeding this threshold would be catastrophic. To secure a sustainable future, we must collectively phase out fossil fuel usage and hasten the just transition to sustainable energy sources, targeting net zero emissions globally by 2050. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6th Assessment Report has already warned that further delay will mean missing, and I quote, a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all, end of quote. SIDS, like Mauritius, wrestle with coastal erosion, marine pollution, and coral bleaching. Sea level rise and climate-related disasters loom large. Mauritius is facing a rise in sea level of 5.6 millimeters annually, almost twice the global average of 3.3 millimeters. These compounding challenges heighten our inherent vulnerabilities and imperil our sustainable development objectives. Mr. President, as leaders, it is our duty and responsibility to save the planet for our future generation. Mauritius is spending about 2% of its GDP on environment and climate change-related policies. Our Climate Change Act serves as the cornerstone of our commitment to fulfilling our obligations under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, and other related instruments on climate change. In order to build our resilience, Mauritius has implemented a series of adaptation measures such as coastal rehabilitation, mangrove propagation, and flood management programs. We have also formulated a nationally appropriate mitigation actions for low carbon strategy. Mauritius is also committed to implementing a series of adaptation and mitigation measures aimed at reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 40% and achieving 60% of energy production from green sources by 2030. In order to ensure the successful implementation of our national determined contributions, a total of $6.5 billion is required. Despite the economic constraints, we have been able to commit $2.5 billion. Our challenge is to secure the remaining $4 billion. Indeed, all SIDS need adequate and predictable support, including climate finance from the international community. We call on international financial institutions and development partners to ensure that access to climate finance by SIDS is simplified and made easier. We look forward to the swift operationalization of the loss and damage facility agreed upon at COP27. This facility represents hope for those in urgent need and cannot remain a mere promise. Developed countries must urgently deliver on their promise made 14 years ago at the Copenhagen Conference to provide climate finance of $100 billion per year. As it is, this amount is no longer sufficient, so there is a need to make the scale of climate finance commensurate with the challenge through the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. Mr. President, we urge international financial institutions to recognize that GDP per capita is not the sole measure of a country's development. We call on the international financial institutions and development partners to use the multi-dimensional vulnerability index developed by the United Nations as a tool in further integrating SIDS vulnerability into their decision-making. SIDS are hopeful that the 4th SIDS conference in Antigua and Barbuda will deliver a more focused, measurable, and fully resourced program of action that is tailored to the circumstances of SIDS. Mr. President, we look to the Summit of the Future in 2024 to address issues of financial stability, promote financial inclusion and debt sustainability, and embrace sustainability. We call for an inclusive and equitable global governance and not a finance divide. Mauritius believes firmly that the SDG stimulus and the Bridgetown Initiative can accelerate progress towards the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Mr. President, the United Nations report, SIDS in Numbers 2017, projects that Mauritius will become a water-stressed country by 2025, barely 2 years from now. It is my government's top priority to ensure the continuous supply of clean and safe water to every citizen. We will continue to invest in water storage capacities to face the effects of climate change and achieve long-term water security. Mr. President, the ocean on which we are all dependent is a critical reservoir of marine biodiversity. Mauritius welcomes the adoption of the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. And I'm pleased to inform that Mauritius has signed this agreement. This historic, legally binding instrument is a victory for multilateralism and international law, and a game changer towards the conservation and sustainable use of marine resources. We encourage all countries to sign and ratify the agreement so that it can enter into force as soon as possible. In the same vein, Mauritius reiterates its invitation to states, NGOs, and other stakeholders to support the marine protected area, which Mauritius will be establishing around the Chagos Archipelago. We also look forward to the finalization of the international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, and ensure its effective implementation. Mr. President, democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights are fundamental values which every country must respect and abide by. The instability in some parts of Africa is detrimental to progress. Upholding the rule of law is essential for restoring faith in governance, fostering stability, and enabling sustainable progress on the continent. Peaceful transition of power through democratic means is the only way to ensure peace, development, and prosperity. Mr. President, we proudly welcome the admission of the African Union as a member of the G20. We reaffirm our solidarity with the Palestinian people and reiterate our unwavering support for the two-state solution as we recognize its potential to bring lasting peace and stability into the region. We commend the recent step taken to seek an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice and hope that the Palestinian people will be able to live in freedom in their own state. Mr. President, as we navigate through an increasingly complex path, it is crucial that we adapt our global institutions to effectively address the challenges of the 21st century. The United Nations Security Council has a vital role to play in maintaining international peace and security. However, it no longer reflects the realities of the modern world. Urgent reform of the United Nations Security Council and the revitalization of the General Assembly are essential to strengthen the United Nations for future generations. Mr. President, amidst the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the international community must relentlessly pursue peaceful dialogue. We commend African nations and other mediators for their vital role in this regard. Mr. President, it is now 4 years since the International Court of Justice gave its advisory opinion on the legal consequences on the separation of the Chagos Archipelago from Mauritius prior to its independence. The ICJ made it clear that the Chagos Archipelago is an integral part of the territory of Mauritius and invited the colonial power to withdraw its administration from the archipelago as rapidly as possible. Ever since, the government of Mauritius made a strong commitment to implement a program of resettlement in the Chagos Archipelago for Mauritian nationals, in particular those of Chagosian origin who have suffered historic injustice by being forcibly removed from their birthplace. We are hopeful that soon they will be able to resettle in the Chagos Archipelago. Indeed, Mauritius and the United Kingdom have started negotiations on the exercise of sovereignty over the Chagos Archipelago on the basis of international law. We hope that these talks will lead to the completion of the decolonization process of Mauritius and enable Mauritius to implement its resettlement program. We also appeal to France to resolve the dispute over Tromelin, which forms an integral part of the territory of Mauritius, in the spirit of friendship that characterizes the relations between the two countries. Mr. President, we are at a crossroads. We do not want to be judged by the next generation for having been complacent. Let us seize this opportunity to recommit, to forge ahead the future we want for us and for our future generations. I remain confident that we will discover the common purpose needed to restore trust in our shared future. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Minister for Defense, Home Affairs and External Communications, Minister for Rodriguez Outer Islands and Territorial Integrity of the Republic of Mauritius for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Anwar Ibrahim, Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance of Malaysia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Anwar Ibrahim, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Malaysia. I invite him to address the Assembly. Dipersilakan Yang Amat Berhormat.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam Malaysia Madani. Izinkan saya bagi pihak negara dan rakyat Malaysia mengemukakan pandangan ke arah keamanan dan kesejahteraan sempena Perhimpunan Agung PBB New York September 2023. Mr. President, when this August Assembly was established almost 80 years ago, the world was still reeling from the horrors of a catastrophic bloodletting that our nation's resolved should never be repeated. A decision profound in wisdom, magnanimous in intent, and bold in ambition was made so that the General Assembly would become the main deliberative, policy-making, and representative organ of the United Nations. A decision that manifested no less than the very strength and courage of our convictions. By giving equal voice to the sovereign nations of the world, the founders of the United Nations pursued a vision of a more democratic world predicated on the dictates of equity and justice. This was a vision that consigned to the past the predations of the strong of the weak, the strong over the weak, of the rich and powerful over the poor and the marginalized, and of the big powers over the rest. That vision, in my opinion, has been utterly shattered to pieces. Today, we find that the major powers and those that aspire to greater international status are increasingly casting the United Nations aside for smaller, supposedly more efficacious platforms. As the powers that be continue to pay lip service to the imperative of multilateralism, we see the emergence of minilateralism instead, effectively becoming fragmented configurations of power. Mr. President, we are living in a deeply polarized world. We are seeing major power rivalry unfolding with consequences that will negatively impact nations, especially the smaller ones in the regions of conflict. The upshot is that we are confronted with a geopolitical and geostrategic dilemma. While the major powers continue to assure that a binary choice is not being imposed, the reality for many is that it is the only choice offered. Unchecked, this will ultimately lead once again to a world where the masses are unrepresented, where the few rule over the many and the many resent the few. The lofty ideals and principles enshrined in the UN Charter call upon nations to resolve their disputes through peaceful means and refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity and sovereignty or political independence of any state. We condemned unequivocally the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This conflict in Ukraine, for example, underscores the imperative to make peace and settle differences amicably through negotiations. Nevertheless, time is not on our side. And owing to the protracted failure to deal with this Russian-Ukraine crisis, I urge for a concerted multilateral effort led by the United Nations to resolve this. We cannot choose our neighbors, but we can choose to live in peace with them. And peace cannot happen without the cessation of hostilities by all parties. It is imperative for all parties to return to dialogue and resolve their differences through the negotiation table. The extent of the Ukraine conflict has radiated throughout the world as food prices have skyrocketed, leading to shortages and hunger, further malnutrition and despair. As in other conflicts elsewhere, be it in the Middle East or Southeast Asia, forced migration take place, piling on the problems of refugees and statelessness. Mr. President, in the Middle East, the politics of dispossession continues with a vengeance, with more illegal settlements being built, stripping Palestinians of land that rightly belongs to them. This constitutes a gross violation of international law. It also poses an insurmountable obstacle to a two-state solution, not to mention the continued killings. There is also flagrant hypocrisy in dealing with the issue of Palestine. The international community must speak up against the atrocities committed towards the Palestinians, even as they so vehemently speak out against human rights violations, injustice, and abusive regimes. On Afghanistan, Malaysia remains deeply concerned with the dire humanitarian situation in the country. This is especially so given that the country is grappling with its third consecutive year of drought and devastating locust infestation that severely undermined wheat harvests. On our part, Malaysia is committed to continue its existing people-to-people relations with Afghanistan, including through the provision of humanitarian aid. However, we remain resolute and firm in our call on the authority of Afghanistan to reverse their exclusionary and discriminatory policies against women and girls. Denying their right to go to school is a violation of the teachings of Islam, not to mention the UN Charter and the multilateral framework of human rights. They are also profoundly detrimental to the future of Afghanistan. Mr. President, we are deeply horrified by the continued post-coup violence and instability in Myanmar. This is currently among Southeast Asia's and ASEAN's biggest strategic and humanitarian challenges in recent years. The barbarism and depravity inflicted upon the people of Myanmar is indefensible and goes against the values or principles shared by the peoples and the region, in the region and globally. The support of the international community, including the United Nations, is crucial to urge continuously and maintain the necessary pressure on the military authorities to reverse their course. Inasmuch as the principle of ASEAN centrality dictates the continued atrocities must end, Malaysia calls on Myanmar to immediately implement the ASEAN 5-point consensus towards achieving peace and stability in the country. ASEAN is navigating the rivalry between the major powers in the Asia-Pacific. Malaysia believes that any strategy undertaken should neither start nor exacerbate a race for dominance. Instead, such strategies should contribute to peace and stability, security and prosperity in the region. Mr. President, scientists have confirmed that the world has just experienced its hottest summer in history. We have heard Secretary General Guterres gravely declare that climate breakdown has begun. Even Malaysia is seeing an increase in adverse impacts of climate change, with increasing temperature, rising sea levels, intensified monsoons, and erratic weather patterns disrupting livelihood and degrading local ecosystems. As such, we have not a moment to lose. Malaysia is doing its part by developing low-carbon and renewable energy roadmaps to implement mitigating and adaptation strategies. The newly launched National Energy Transition Roadmap should aid us in achieving our NDCs as well as lighting the path towards our net zero aspirations. Discussions on climate change in the absence of equity, justice, and the necessary means to assist and empower countries to undertake greater climate action is an exercise in futility. We also urge the developed countries to fulfill their commitment of mobilizing $100 billion a year to support climate ambition endeavors of developing countries, while recognizing that trillions of dollars per annum will be needed in the near future. Mr. President, the 2023 SDG report has confirmed that we are falling behind, with nearly a third of the targets either at the state of inertia or worse, regressing. The global economy is also projected to continue to be weighed down by geopolitical uncertainties, supply chain disruptions, increase in commodity prices, as well as challenging financial conditions. This has widened the gap between economic growth and income, leading to a continuous disparity. As the growth in income fails to match economic growth, households become burdened with debt. We now have the super rich living side by side with the ultra poor. The contrast lies starkly in the things that matter: food on the table, shelter, access to quality education, healthcare. These factors cry out for drastic systemic reform, a total reset of global institutions that impact our lives. Or else we will continue to face widening inequality, setting apart nations and peoples. Mr. President, we are concerned over the emergence of a new form of racism characterized by xenophobia, negative profiling, and stereotyping of Muslims. This is manifested in an alarming trend of hatred, intolerance, and acts of violence against Muslims and their sanctities. We are appalled by the legitimization of these acts under the feeble defense of human rights. Quran burnings are nothing but a clear Islamophobic act intended to incite hatred. Inaction in the face of such blatant provocation to a religion is simply irresponsible and sends a dangerous message to humanity. We must embody the values of acceptance, tolerance, and mutual respect. We must promote intercultural, inter-civilization, and interreligious understanding and cooperation. We must unite our faith in common cause to promote understanding and goodwill amongst our peoples, and strengthen peace and harmony among nations. Mr. President, these are indeed tall orders, but that is the very reason we are here. I truly believe that no challenge, however formidable, is insurmountable if we secure the collective commitment of this global community, the member states of this august institution. What we need is trust and the conviction to make the world a better place. The will to work together on a platform of consensus and solidarity. Early this year, I introduced Malaysia Madani, a vision built on the pillars of core values that we believe are indispensable in any harmonious, thriving, and peaceful society. Compassion, ihsan and rahmah, respect, trust and amana, innovation, prosperity, and sustainability. These basic principles and moral values also apply in the context of our relations with other countries. Whether it is G7 or G20 or G77 or APEC or the world's largest FTA, there is no denying that multilateral collaboration is the sine qua non for any effective and sustainable resolution to the crises that the world is beset with. In this regard, it bears stressing that Malaysia's commitment to the UN and the multilateral system is born out of the strong conviction that all countries, no matter how big or small, rich or poor, strong or weak, have a common responsibility towards creating a better world for tomorrow. The world and our future it is what we envision and construct it to be. Malaysia believes we can achieve this through greater trust and strengthen multilateralism. The United Nations can be the vessel to take us from despondency to a brighter future, from uncertainty to optimism, and from vulnerability to resilience. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih Yang Amat Berhormat. On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Malaysia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Robert Abela, Prime Minister of the Republic of Malta. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Robert Abela, Prime Minister of the Republic of Malta. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends. It is indeed a privilege to be once again addressing you on behalf of the people of Malta. And as I was preparing my remarks, I was reminded of those timeless lines by the poet John Donne. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Malta is a proud island nation, but we are most definitely not an island entire of ourselves. Quite the reverse. Throughout our history, we have looked outward to the world, conscious of our unique geographic position at the crossroads of Europe and Africa, consciously stepping up into a unique role, building bridges and building understanding between different traditions. Indeed, earlier this very month, we were very proud to be such a bridge, trusted by both sides to host private talks between the United States National Security Advisor and the Chinese Foreign Minister. Malta, providing a safe space for vital discussions between the world's two biggest powers. And it is to build bridges just like that, that almost 60 years ago, the Republic of Malta was admitted as a full member of the United Nations. It is a sign of confidence our fellow members have in Malta's commitment to working together for the common good, that they have elected our nation to serve on the Security Council for this year and next. It is why, embedded at the heart of our Constitution, is the active pursuit of peace, security, and social progress among all nations. Malta will always be open to the world. Malta will never turn its back on its neighbors. Malta will continue to work relentlessly with our partners in Europe and beyond to stand up for peace and the rule of law. Sadly, the need to stand up for those values has rarely been more urgent or more important than it is today. We witness Russia's violation of international law with its continued assault on Ukraine. Malta's response to the situation in Ukraine and other crises across the world is guided by the value of neutrality, which is enshrined in our Constitution. Malta's neutrality does mean that we will continue to be directly opposed to military aggression and unilateral action against members of the global community and the rule-based order. But Malta's neutrality does not mean that we are indifferent to what happens around us. We will never And we can never be neutral when we see pain and suffering caused by an illegal invasion. And in the spirit of peace, we call on Russia to withdraw its forces from the sovereign territory of Ukraine. And we urge all nations gathered here to unite to deliver an end to the war. The tragedy of war is not just that those directly involved suffer, but that the consequences reverberate around the world. The already precarious situation of global food security has been made much worse by the invasion of Ukraine. An estimated extra 122 million people across the world pushed into hunger since 2019. Malta urges Russia to rejoin the Black Sea Grain Initiative and to stop standing in the way of vital food supplies leaving Ukraine to feed the world's most needy. Being neutral has never meant Malta ignoring the problems faced by our neighbors. We are acutely aware that many of the challenges which we face at home are best tackled together with our Mediterranean neighbors, which is why I am very proud that our capital, Valletta, will host the next summit of the EU's Med9 members in a week's time. The most pressing issue in the Mediterranean is definitely Libya. The whole peace, the full peace of our whole region depends on a lasting settlement there. Malta wishes to see a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Libya. And this through a Libyan-led political process. It is vital that the entire international community encourages this process and gives the Libyan people the support they need to overcome the instability for which they have already paid such a high price. The need to recover and also rebuild after the tragic devastation of Storm Daniel underlies the urgency and the importance of a lasting settlement that gives all Libyans the effective government they deserve. For Malta, being a good neighbor means offering practical help. Within hours of the disaster hitting, a team from our army and our civil protection department was on the way to Libya to play their part in the rescue effort. Maltese officers also remain on active service within the United Nations forces in Lebanon, proudly wearing blue berets as part of the interim force, underlining the importance which Malta attaches to peacekeeping as well as peace building across the Mediterranean. And as the nation at the crossroads of Europe and Africa, our extended neighborhood stretches beyond the Mediterranean coast. Our objective is to be a true bridge between the continents. My government has underlined Malta's commitment to Africa by opening new diplomatic missions in Ghana and also in Ethiopia, and putting into action our first national strategy for Africa. But strengthening connections doesn't just mean strengthening diplomatic ties. We have already concluded agreements with countries like Ethiopia to facilitate connectivity for businesses and people between the continents. Malta remains deeply disturbed by the dire situation in the Sahel, political turmoil, irregular migration, the jihadist attacks on the civilian population, and food insecurity. We are also particularly concerned about the current situation in Niger and underline the urgency of a peaceful resolution to the crisis. From Ukraine to Mali, Libya to Niger, it can all too often seem like we are living in an era of despair. And the problems which the world faces are indeed deep and profound. It would be all too easy and all too understandable to fall into despondency, to think that nothing can be done. But in the rest of my remarks today, I want to show that things can be done, that we can make a difference, that if a small nation like Malta can play its part in addressing the most urgent issues our world faces, then this United Nations can put in place real and effective solutions globally. I began with that famous quotation that no man is an island, and leaders cannot be an island either. Our fine words to this August Assembly must not stand alone. They must be directly connected to our actions at home and to the priorities of our people. We must show through deeds and not just words that we can address the fears as well as the hopes and aspirations of the people that we represent. One of the advantages of being Prime Minister of a small country is that you are very close to the people that you represent. You hear loud and clear what is worrying them. And one of the persistent worries that I hear is that people feel a niggling sense of insecurity. Post-pandemic, they feel that the world is a less stable and increasingly scary place. And with such big global forces at play, too often citizens can feel like they don't have their hands on the levers which control their future. I understand where those concerns are coming from. Addressing them is why I am into politics. It is why I am adamant that every global policy that we put in place must make a difference locally, that we can show that by working together internationally, we can deliver solutions nationally. That way, we can address what pessimists call the new age of insecurity by building a new age of security. Yet, we must be realistic. There is no magic wand. I am also realistic about what any individual nation can do. And I am also acutely aware that there is only so much a small nation can do. But if we all play our part, we can all make a difference. In short, we are stronger together. No one can feel secure about their family's future unless they feel secure about the future of the planet on which we all live and the natural world on which we all depend. The biggest threat to our planet is clearly climate change. And climate change isn't some sort of abstract problem. This is a very real emergency, the consequences of which are being felt in every part across the world. Current pledges and the current targets are not sufficient to keep the 1.5 degrees objective of the Paris Agreement within reach. Malta wholeheartedly commends the Secretary General's initiative to help states accelerate efforts at the global level. We must all play our part and we must all work together. The time for excuses is long over. Malta is a proud maritime nation. The sea plays a profound part in Malta's national life and has a special place in the hearts of the Maltese people. Rising sea levels are a severe threat to the security, the livelihood, and indeed the very existence of island countries like ours. Securing the future of our seas and oceans is an urgent imperative of the government of Malta, which is why we have made climate and oceans the #1 priority during our term on the United Nations Security Council. And to give the debate new momentum, we made a high-level meeting on the implications of rising sea levels for peace and security, the signature event of our presidency of the Security Council last February. And we enthusiastically extend our support for the newly created coalition on addressing sea level rise and existential threats. It is not just the direct consequences of rising sea levels that we need to be concerned about. As land is degraded, freshwater shortages, displacement of people, and food insecurity all risk undermining global security, generating new conflicts and exacerbating existing ones. Rising sea levels also threaten the very territorial integrity of states as a result of coastal inundation, with a consequent danger of disputes and conflict. So, I wish to reiterate in the strongest of terms, as I already did at COP27, that no coastal state should lose any of its existing rights over its maritime zones due to rising sea levels. As a United Nations, we must preserve the sovereignty of coastal states, no matter what the ravages of the sea. As island nations, we turn to the world, but we don't turn our backs on each other. Solidarity between small island countries is a key value for Malta, and a value that we turn into practical support. Like the majority of nations in the EU, in the UN, Malta was late to develop. And we have experienced many of the same challenges which are currently being faced by developing countries. That's why we have made raising awareness of the unique vulnerabilities of small island developing states a top priority. And why supporting sustainable development for small island developing states is a cornerstone of our foreign policy. To do this, we are committed to our Island for Islands initiative, delivering concrete, practical support for those small island nations, the nations which are most exposed to the impacts of climate change. We share best practice and help build capacity, and we were indeed delighted that Malta's scholarship program for students from small island developing states has been recognized with a UN Partnerships Award. Protecting our planet is indeed a mammoth task, but by taking visible, measurable action, we can and we must show our citizens that they have reason to believe in the security of the Earth's future. There are those who state that securing the planet can only be achieved at the expense of economic growth. I firmly reject that thinking. In fact, I believe that the opposite is true. Environmental security can only be achieved if citizens feel economic security. Only if you feel secure about your family's economic well-being can you turn your attention to the well-being of the earth. And only by delivering sustainable economic growth can we deliver sustainable environmental protection. From the perspective of an outward-facing trading nation like Malta, there is one overwhelming, clear, and present danger to economic security: the prospect of a new era of protectionism. If protectionism grows unchecked, it could do untold damage to an export-orientated island economy like ours. The Maltese people have benefited hugely from the opening up of the world economy. As vested interests have given way to innovation, they have seized the new opportunities. And like many young economies, Malta has harnessed digital technology and the breaking down of trade and tariff barriers to expand into sectors that were previously off limits to small nations like ours. What the world economy and the world's citizens need is not a new era of protectionism. Instead, we need a new age of social protection, not putting up barriers to trade, but putting in place standards and rights for our workers. I understand and also appreciate how some people feel left behind by the sheer pace of economic change this century. The pandemic showed the need to think through the geopolitical risks of supply chains. But the answer isn't to turn back the clock. The answer is to get the future right. One of the themes of this year's General Assembly is rebuilding trust to achieve sustainability for all. And this is exactly what we must do. Too often, smaller and developing countries have been excluded from the decision-making process and have suffered as a result. Malta's clear. Trust on trade can only be achieved if genuine solidarity is maintained with all member states. Often, and open trading should be fair trading. Open economies should be fair economies. Only with fairness will citizens' sense of security be rebuilt. I came into politics passionate about building a country where decision-making is based on fairness and opportunity, with a commitment to equality, which is also a commitment to competitiveness. Take gender equality. Empowering women powers economic growth. One of our government's proudest moments and achievements is the introduction of free childcare that has enabled more parents to re-enter the workforce, increasing women's economic power and increasing growth for the economy as a whole. I am also proud to be speaking to you in the same month that Malta hosted a hugely successful Europride, crowning recognition for the transformation in our nation's approach to LGBTIQ+ rights that has taken place since my party was returned to government, and a huge boost for our island's profile and also our island's economy. And take closing the digital divide, equipping more citizens of all ages and from all backgrounds with the digital skills that they need, which both increases their individual earning and adds to the nation's productivity, which is why we've extended ICT as a compulsory subject in all our upper secondary schools. So, Malta calls on the international community to work harder to ensure that the digital divide is narrowed, not just within each nation, but also globally. Similarly, upholding the rights of the child, as enshrined in the UN Convention, is of paramount importance to Malta. We work very hard to ensure that each and every child has the opportunities they deserve, no matter what the circumstances of their birth. By tackling child poverty and ensuring equal access to education and healthcare, we aim to ensure no child is left behind. Rightly, it is a moral imperative, but it is also an economic one. Leaving any of the next generation of workers without the skills they need isn't just damaging to the individuals excluded from prosperity. It is also damaging to economic growth. None of us can feel secure unless each and every child in our societies is safe and secure. One significant manifestation of the feeling of insecurity has been the number of people facing mental health difficulties. None of us can feel secure unless we know that mental health is taken as seriously as physical health by our healthcare systems. Even if we don't have mental health issues ourselves, knowing that care and support is there, should we or those we care for need it, is part of the reassurance that an active state should provide. To help provide that reassurance, in Malta, we have implemented a comprehensive mental health strategy to build capacity, address causes, and offering continuing support to individuals with mental health needs and also to their families. Through initiatives like the National Mental Health Helpline launched last year, offering a one-stop 24/7 resource to connect patients with the services that they need. And one of the biggest drivers of mental health worries is the fear of the future. Indeed, none of us can feel secure about our lives if we don't feel secure about what is coming tomorrow. Right now, one of the biggest fears many have is of technology. We have lived through 2 decades of unprecedented change, from the basic mobile phone and text messaging to smartphones and face recognition. It can often seem like society has lost control, that the technology itself is in charge. And now, with the advent of generative artificial intelligence, the risk is that that seems truer than ever. How we feel about our future is unfortunately not helped by lurid media headlines about the machines taking over, spreading fear about AI taking jobs and rendering human effort obsolete. Let's be clear, AI will have a huge impact on all aspects of society. But let us also be clear that if we as leaders take the right decisions, that impact can be a positive one on our societies. Again, as with trade, the answer isn't to try and turn the clock back, to close our eyes to the inevitable and hope that it will go away. Indeed, the answer is to get the future right, to take the decisions now so that we can harness the power of AI for the public and the common good, not fear it as a coming catastrophe. In Malta, we are already doing just that. We are already seeing and experiencing how AI can enhance public service, improving lives for all our citizens. We have currently six pilot projects covering areas from healthcare to traffic management, taking ownership through leadership and not trying to ignore the future. Though, yes, naturally, there is a limit to what any one country, especially a small one, can do. To make AI a global good, we need global action. Malta stands resolutely behind efforts to increase and enhance international cooperation on AI. Technology is changing too fast. Its potential so vast that failing to work together isn't really an option anymore. Of course, it is not just in the tech field that we need to work together. Working together is not only a key value for Malta, it is at the very center of the political tradition I proudly represent. Put simply, that standing together, we can achieve so much more than working alone. That yes, none of us, nations, leaders, societies, stand as islands, isolated from each other. We are all connected in even more ways. We live in a new age, in an age where you can send a video to the other side of the world faster than you can walk to the other side of the room that you're sitting in. In an age when the decisions about how to generate energy in one country can impact the very survival of another country oceans away. In an age where the aggression of one country against another can lead to hunger across a different continent. In such an age, the importance of working together will only become stronger. The word for it, multilateralism, may not trip off the tongue, but it is more important than ever. To make multilateralism work in this age of insecurity, we need to ensure that a much wider group of voices are heard in this United Nations and around the globe. The voices of all countries, large and small, rich and poor, developed and developing. The voices of all sections of civil society. Women, not just men, young as well as old, gay and not just straight. All backgrounds, all ethnicities. I refuse to believe, Malta refuses to believe that a new age of insecurity is inevitable. I know, Malta knows that we must build a new age of security, not by trying to turn the clock back, but by getting the future right. If we work together, if we listen to and learn from each other, if we understand and appreciate the desire of our citizens to take back control of their lives, we can and we will get the future right. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Republic of Malta for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mark Rutte, Prime Minister and Minister for General Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Mark Rutte, Prime Minister and Minister for General Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln wrote a letter to Edwin Stanton, his Secretary of War. He observed that you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. It was a different time, with different problems and different ways of solving them. A lot has changed since then, and yet Lincoln's words remain as relevant as ever. They show that responsibility has always been a watchword, because our very future depends on whether we choose or refuse to take responsibility. Today, there's no time to be lost. There's never been so much at stake at one time. We must combat climate change, fight hunger and poverty, and protect peace and security in many places all over the world. It's human nature to prioritize the issues that affect us most directly. Let's be honest, that goes for all of us here today. Every one of us has come here to discuss the issues we face in our own countries. But if you look beyond our borders, we see that none of those issues stand alone. All the big issues of our time intersect. Their impact is global. Take climate change, or poverty, or conflict. These issues are all related, and we are all affected by them, though perhaps not always in the same way. In Europe, peace has been shattered by Russian aggression. And yes, I am asking once again for your support in ending this terrible war. And at the same time, I realize that some of you are thinking, what about our own challenges? What about our own security? Will you support us there as well? I understand how you feel, and you're right. As the late Secretary General Kofi Annan put it, if the United Nations is not as united as it should be, that is because it is a reflection of the world we live in. And he was also right. For too long at the UN, some interests have weighed more heavily than others. The United Nations is structured as if it were still 1945. But the world has changed. It's taken a long time for that realization to sink in. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. In this world, in this time, we all need each other. All 193 countries. Because we all face a common task. Consider the global distribution of wealth. The Netherlands is not only one of the UN's most loyal development donors. We also support the reform plans of institutions, such as the World Bank. And consider climate change. We need to reduce our footprint, a footprint that leaves its mark on countries far beyond our borders. So that's what we are doing, by building a circular economy by 2050, by making our financial sector more sustainable, and by combating deforestation and loss of biodiversity. In each of these areas, partnerships are essential. Above all, partnerships with the countries hit hardest by climate change. Today, I will speak with several small island development states about climate adaptation, about ways of exchanging knowledge, expertise, and innovative solutions. And yes, such partnerships begin with talking. But they must go beyond words and promises. The Netherlands is increasing its annual contribution to international climate finance to 1.8 billion euros by 2025. And over half of that will go to climate adaptation. You all understand how important this is. In 2 months' time, we will gather in Dubai to take stock of our progress towards the Paris climate goals. But we already know that we are way off track. So something has to be done right now. The Netherlands will fulfill its responsibility by providing 100 million people in developing countries with access to renewable energy by 2030, by massively scaling up our renewable energy investment, and by helping to set up and scale up green hydrogen corridors together with South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Namibia, and others. Currently, only 2% of global investment goes to Africa, despite the huge potential there. We have a collective interest in making sure that potential can be tapped. Because if we don't help Africa to grow sustainably, we will all miss our climate goals. COP28 must mark a course correction. There we must agree and explain how the world will get on track to meet the 1.5-degree goal. If not, the consequences will be disastrous. The examples I've offered of Dutch action together with our kingdom partners in the Caribbean show that we are willing to fulfill our responsibility, that we are willing to pick up the phone, to answer the knock at the door. The most striking of truth is also the most obvious. We aren't as different as we might think. What unites us is bigger and stronger than what divides us. I see that in my bilateral discussions. I see it in the European Union. And I see it here at the UN. However different our backgrounds are, however different our countries, we share the same universal values. Peace, freedom, justice. On the 17th of July 2014, those values, which the Netherlands holds so dear, were trampled underfoot. It was the day that flight MH17 was downed by Russia. The day the Dutch people and people everywhere were reminded in such a painful manner that peace, freedom and justice are not givens, but require our constant efforts. Those values, those collective aims, form the basis of the United Nations. They are the reason we are here today. With that in mind, let me talk about Ukraine. Every day, millions of people feel the effects of Russia's aggression. Above all, the Ukrainian people, who are the victims of terrible crimes. Every day they live in fear. Am I still safe in my own home, in my city? Will I ever see my family alive again? These are questions no one should ever have to ask. In Europe, we thought we'd never need to ask them again. But we were wrong. And so now it's up to us to respond, to pick up the phone, to answer the knock at the door. We can't leave one country to fend for itself. I know some countries are hesitating, asking themselves why they should get involved in someone else's war. To them I say, it's your war too. Because even if there is no shooting in your towns and your cities aren't being bombed, this war affects everyone. People in vulnerable countries know exactly what I'm talking about. The global food supply is being used as a weapon of war and food prices are soaring. Millions of people are being pushed back into poverty and hunger. And it's precisely the most vulnerable countries that are being hit the hardest. You won't find them on the official casualty list. But those countries and the people who live there are also the victims of Putin's aggression. Russia's conduct goes against everything that we in the UN stand for. That alone is reason enough to take action. The Charter of the UN, our common foundation, is very clear on this. When push comes to shove, we can't neglect our duty because it's not convenient, because we have other things on our minds, or because it seems too hard. No, no, no. The Charter is intended for moments like these, for a time and a place like this. The General Assembly of the United Nations is the ultimate time and place to hold each other to account, to remind each other of our responsibilities. That goes for all of you and that goes for me too. I've explained how the Netherlands will fulfill its responsibility. You can hold us to that and you can call us to account for our actions. And in the same way, I'm calling on you. Speak out against Putin and Russia's violation of the UN Charter. Support the peace plan. Support Ukraine. Even if it takes time. Even if there are setbacks. Especially if it takes time and there are setbacks. And tell Russia to give back the stolen children of Ukraine. Some countries feel they are supporting peace in Ukraine simply by calling for an immediate ceasefire. They think that this will help end the war, that peace, freedom and security will return automatically. They see it as an expression of nuance. They want to see the good in others. They don't want to point the finger of blame. In the case of the war in Ukraine, there is no shared blame. There is no doubt about who the perpetrator is and who the victim. Russia attacked Ukraine, a sovereign nation, not the other way around. So there can be no shared solution. Russia is the aggressor here, and it is not Ukraine supporters that are prolonging the war. It is Russia. Putin has occupied 20% of Ukraine. An immediate ceasefire now would mean victory for Russia. That is the reality. And a just and lasting peace can be achieved only if we recognize that reality. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot at stake here. Putin is counting on us being divided. He is counting on us ending our support as the war drags on longer and costs more than we thought. He is counting on us losing interest and returning to our own problems. This is Putin's strategy. And now that push has come to shove, we must show that we have learned from the past, that we will all pick up the phone, that we will all answer the knock at the door, that we will all fulfill our responsibility. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister for General Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Anwar ul-Haq Kakar, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Anwar ul-Haq Kakar, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Mr. President, Excellencies, Head of State, Government and delegations, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government and people of Pakistan, I convey to you, Mr. President, our warm congratulations on your elections to guide the work of this historic session of the UN General Assembly. I'm confident that your vast diplomatic experience and the sunny disposition of your beautiful island country will enable you to steer this assembly to a most successful conclusion. Mr. President, we are meeting at a tense and pivotal moment in modern history. Conflicts rage in Ukraine and in 50 other places around the world. Tensions between the global powers have continued to escalate. We see the rise of new and old military and political blocs. Geopolitics is resurging when geoeconomics should have primacy in the world. The world cannot afford Cold War 2.0. There are far greater challenges confronting humankind which demand global cooperation and collective action. The world's economic prospects also appear gloomy. Global growth is slow. High interest rates could trigger a recession. A succession of exogenous shocks COVID, conflict, and climate change have devastated the economies of many developing countries. Many countries of the global south have barely managed to stave off defaults. Poverty and hunger have grown, reversing the development gains of 3 decades. At yesterday's SDG summit, far-reaching commitments were made to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. We must ensure implementation of the SDG stimulus, the rechanneling of unused special drawing rights for development banks, and the resolution of the debt problems of the 59 countries in debt distress. Pakistan also looks forward to the fulfillment of the climate change commitments made at COP28 by the developed world to provide over $100 billion in annual climate finance, allocate at least half of such finance for adaptation in developing countries, operationalize the fund and funding arrangements for loss and damage, and accelerate their carbon emission. Mitigation targets to keep alive the goal of restricting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Attempts to selectively provide these funds on the basis of geopolitical considerations should be resisted. Mr. President, Pakistan's triple food, fuel, and finance challenge is a prime illustration of the impacts of COVID, conflicts, and climate on developing countries. Pakistan is one of the worst affected countries from the impacts of climate change. The epic floods of last summer submerged a third of our country, killed 1,700, and displaced over 8 million people, destroyed vital infrastructure, and caused over $30 billion in damage to Pakistan's economy. Pakistan is gratified by the commitment of over $10.5 billion for Pakistan's comprehensive plan for recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction with resilience. The 4RF plan at the Geneva conference last January. Specific projects are being submitted to ensure timely funding and execution of the 4RF plan. I hope our development partners will accord priority to allocation of funds for our resilient recovery plan, which has been costed at $13 billion. Mr. President, Pakistan government is committed to rapid economic recovery. We will stabilize our foreign exchange reserves and our currency, expand domestic revenues, and most importantly, mobilize significant domestic and external investment. Facilitation Council, SIFC, to expedite investment decisions. 28 projects have been identified in priority sectors: agriculture, mining, energy, and IT, for implementation in collaboration with Pakistan's partners. Pakistan's long-term shift to geoeconomics is well underway. The second phase of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor has been initiated, covering railway, infrastructure, and manufacturing projects. Pakistan also looks forward to the early implementation of the connectivity projects with Central Asia. Mr. President, development depends on peace. Pakistan is situated in one of the least economically integrated regions in the world. Pakistan believes that region develops together. Therefore, Pakistan desires peaceful and productive relations with all our neighbors, including India. Kashmir is the key to peace between Pakistan and India. The Jammu and Kashmir dispute is one of the oldest issues on the agenda of the Security Council. India has evaded implementation of the Security Council's resolutions, which call for the final disposition of Jammu and Kashmir to be decided by its people through UN-supervised plebiscite. Since 5th August 2019, India has deployed 900,000 troops in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to impose the final solution for Kashmir. To this end, India has imposed extended lockdowns and curfews, jailed all genuine Kashmiri leaders, violently suppressed peaceful protests, resorted to extrajudicial killings of innocent Kashmiris in fake encounters, and so-called cordon and search operations, and imposed collective punishments destroying entire villages. Access to occupied Kashmir, demanded by the UN High Commission for Human Rights and over a dozen special rapporteurs, has been denied by New Delhi. Mr. President, the UN Security Council must secure the implementation of its resolution on Kashmir. The UN Military Observer Group for India and Pakistan should be reinforced. Global powers should convince New Delhi to accept Pakistan's offer of mutual restraint on strategic and conventional weapons. Mr. President, peace in Afghanistan is a strategic imperative for Pakistan. Pakistan shares the concern of international community with respect to Afghanistan, particularly the rights of women and girls. Yet we advocate continued humanitarian assistance to a destitute Afghan population in which Afghan girls and women are the most vulnerable, as well as revival of the Afghan economy and implementation of the connectivity projects with Central Asia. Pakistan's first priority is to prevent and counter all terrorism from and within Afghanistan. Pakistan condemns the cross-border terrorist attacks against Pakistan by the TTP, Daesh, and other groups operating from Afghanistan. We have sought Kabul's support and cooperation to prevent these attacks. However, we are also taking necessary measures to end this externally encouraged terrorism. Mr. President, Pakistan welcomes the progress made towards ending the conflicts in Syria and Yemen. In particular, we warmly welcome the normalization of relations between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Unfortunately, the tragedy of Palestine continues. With Israeli military raids, airstrikes, expansion of settlements, and eviction of Palestinians, durable peace can be established only through a two-state solution and the establishment of a viable and contiguous Palestinian state within the pre-June 1967 borders, with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Mr. President, UN peacekeeping has been a success story. Over more than 6 decades, Pakistan has contributed 230,000 peacekeepers in 47 missions across the world. Today, UN peacekeepers face complex and unprecedented challenges, especially from criminal and terrorist groups, as in the Sahel. We must ensure the safety and security of peacekeepers. Pakistan shall continue to work with the UN to develop the capabilities and more robust mandates required for successful enforcement actions by UN and international forces where needed. Mr. President, we must counter all terrorists without discrimination, including the rising threat posed by far-right extremist and fascist groups, such as Hindutva-inspired extremists threatening genocide against India's Muslims and Christians alike. We also need to oppose state terrorism, address the root cause of terrorism, such as poverty, injustice, and foreign occupation, and distinguish genuine freedom struggles from terrorism. Pakistan prospers the creation of a committee of the General Assembly to oversee the balanced implementation of all 4 pillars of the global counterterrorism strategy. Mr. President, our progress based on rich history of cooperation, understanding, exchange, and synthesis of ideas among civilization is impearled today. The narratives advocating a clash of civilization have done considerable harm to humanity's progress. Such ideas have done considerable harm to humanity's progress. Such ideas have bred extremism, hatred, and religious intolerance, including Islamophobia. Make no mistake, it's a latent threat that undermines millennia of progress. We need to cherish and celebrate our diversity and different ways of life. Mutual respect, sanctity of religious symbols, scriptures, and personage should be ensured. While Islamophobia is an age-old phenomenon, however, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, it has assumed epidemic proportions, as manifested in the negative profiling of Muslims and attacks on Islamic sites and symbols, such as the recent public burnings of the Holy Quran. Last year, this Assembly adopted a resolution proposed by Pakistan on behalf of the OIC, declaring 15th March as the International Day to combat Islamophobia. Earlier this year, the Human Rights Council adopted an OIC resolution submitted by Pakistan urging states to outlaw the burning of the Holy Quran and similar provocations. We welcome the legislation initiated by Denmark and contemplated by Sweden towards this end. Pakistan and the OIC countries will propose further steps to combat Islamophobia, including the appointment of a special envoy, creation of an Islamophobia data center, legal assistance to victims, and an accountability process to punish Islamophobic crimes. Mr. President, the complex global and regional challenges that the world faces today can be best addressed through effective multilateralism within the framework of the United Nations. However, multilateralism is being eschewed due to the unilateral policies of and strategic rivalry and tensions between global powers. Pakistan will continue to work actively to strengthen multilateral institutions and enhance global cooperation. Pakistan looks forward to continuing negotiation on the scope and elements of the Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future, building on the convergence that emerged in earlier consultations. The summit's preparatory process must not disrupt existing negotiating processes, such as the intergovernmental negotiations on the reform of the Security Council. Mr. President, Pakistan does not believe in elitism. With the Committee of Nations, the UN Charter principles of equality and sovereignty must be preserved in the interest of global peace and prosperity. Pakistan believes that additional permanent members to the Security Council will further erode its credibility and legitimacy. The widest possible agreement can be best achieved on the basis of the Uniting for Consensus Group's proposal for expansion of the Council only in the non-permanent category, with provision for a limited number of long-term seats. Mr. President, Pakistan believes that to build, preserve, and promote peace and prosperity today and in the future, it is vital to reduce great power rivalry and tensions, ensure strict adherence to the UN Charter, consistently implement Security Council resolutions, eliminate the root cause of conflicts, and respect the principles of non-use of force, self-determination, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, non-interference in the internal affairs of the states, and peaceful coexistence. Pakistan will work diligently and actively with all member states to realize these vital elements of a new, equitable, and peaceful world order. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Mia Amor Motli, Prime Minister, Minister for National Security and the Public Service, and Minister for Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency.
This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary
last year. That plea can equally come from those who lost families in the multiple crises across the world in the last few years. That plea can come from small states that may not exist in the future. I ask us, therefore, my friends, to ensure that we summon the will. We listened to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands just now, and he reminded us ably that time is not on our side. And if time is not on our side, what must we do? The truth is, we have made some progress. 2 years ago, the International Monetary Fund did not have a mechanism to focus on cause of the problems that led to massive macroeconomic instability. We now have the establishment of the Resilience and Sustainability Trust that for the first time will make funds available to middle-income countries that are vulnerable. 20-year money with a 10.5-year moratorium. A year ago, the president of the World Bank was questioning whether there was a climate crisis. Today, we have a World Bank that for the first time acknowledges that there should be debt clauses that are suspended, debt pause clauses as they call it. Our battle now is to ensure that those debt pause clauses are not just for future instruments, but for existing instruments. If not, it will not help many. So we have made progress, but there is still much to be done. The issues of debt sustainability cannot be left on the sidelines, particularly with the number of countries, more than 60 countries facing debt row today as we speak because of the polycrises. Countries being forced to choose between development and building of resilience to fight climate. In our small island states, we value education and healthcare and the dignity of life. And therefore it will be anathema for us to tell our citizens that we do not have the space to provide for you those things that were the promise of independence. It is compounded by the failure of the developed world to accept that reparatory justice is a solemn obligation which we must confront. The conversation King Charles told us at the opening of the Commonwealth Heads of Government when he was Prince Charles was a conversation whose time had come, that of reparatory justice. But it can't be a slow conversation taken up when people feel like. It has to be a conversation in which equal partners discuss. It cannot be an act of charity of those who simply feel that their conscience must be cleansed. We were about to write the leaders of the European Union last year on this issue of reparatory justice, and we paused because of the Russian incursion into Ukraine. But it seems as though there are not those who want to make peace there or elsewhere in the world, and therefore we have to lift our finger off the pause button and resume the discussions, because the development deficit caused by centuries of exploitation is now affecting our capacity to build the resilience that is necessary in our nations. Similarly, I want to thank, because a year ago we did not have the Paris Agenda for People and Planet. We had the Bridgetown Initiative, and the Bridgetown Initiative has allowed us to keep the debate going, because we need to change, as I said Monday morning in this hall, the belief that we can have short-term money financing development and building resilience. I shan't go into all of the details because we don't have the time, but suffice it to say that we are committed to the twin battle of saving people and planet, and to ask us to do anything else is a false construct that does not work. The markets have to be educated as to why long-term capital is the only salvation for developing countries and ultimately for people and planet. And my friends, year after year we talk about the need for global moral strategic leadership. I shan't go into all of the details, but in my own region, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Pacific. There are too many examples where we fall short. And I speak specifically now first and foremost about Haiti. The world owes Haiti a resolution. It is not a matter of options. The world owes Haiti a resolution. A year ago, we knew that the gas riots had led to serious instability. And 12 months later, we cannot get out of this building and into the support that the people of Haiti need. There is no doubt a need for a legitimacy with respect to the government of Haiti, and therefore a national unity government may well be the only bridge that can carry us to safety. The Caribbean community has appointed 3 former prime ministers as an eminent persons group. And as we heard the Secretary General say in this hall, politics is the art of compromise. Diplomacy is the art of compromise. I say simply to those who act in the name of the people of Haiti, there must be compromise in constituting that government of national unity if we are to provide the bridge, to provide the security, to stop women from being raped, stop people from being killed, stop people from being affected by cholera and other public health diseases. But even when we put in the institutional support that Haiti may need, and I want to thank the governments of Kenya and Rwanda, who from as far back as 12 months ago committed to being able to provide the kind of institutional support and leadership that the Haitian police need. But as they did that commitment, what they have not necessarily accounted for is the continued reduction in the numbers of the police, largely because of persons fleeing to lands of greater opportunity and being facilitated in so doing. This cannot wait much longer. And I hope that those who constitute the members of the Security Council will recognize that they cannot use Haiti as a pawn because they have suffered for too long and by the hands of too many. I return now to the issue of Cuba. That Cuba can help so many in this world and yet be the continued victim of a blockade of over 60 years, but worse than that, a designation as a state sponsor of terrorism is wrong, wrong, wrong. We left Cuba last week, and what the people of Cuba are being asked to face on a daily basis because of a designation by a dying presidency is wrong. And the voices of the global community, many of whom have been the beneficiaries of Cuban assistance, need to stand united and to be able to say that we cannot fight these battles when we need all hands on deck to save the planet. The artificial division of who is right and who is wrong and who is good and who is bad in the eyes of those who are powerful cannot continue to be the way in which this world functions. And let us go to Venezuela. Oil is likely, oil prices, to go over $100. And those small countries who do not produce oil will be the victims of it, as will be our people, including in large countries like the United States of America. We must bring resolution to these issues. And it is not incapable of resolution. When the United States of America and many countries in Europe determined that they were recognizing President Guaido without there being a presidency for him to assume because he faced no election, the members of the Caribbean community came to this august institution and met with the Secretary General and met with a number of countries. And little by little we saw people apply their hearts to wisdom and to recognize that the Charter of the United Nations did not allow for that kind of unconstitutional conferral of presidency on anyone. I say today that there must be transparency. It cannot be that the Caribbean community that needs a mechanism for stabilization in an energy crisis cannot have access to the concessionary prices that the government and people of Venezuela are prepared to make available to its neighbors to minimize the suffering. How is it possible for Chevron and the European Union to access the oil and gas of Venezuela, but the people of the Caribbean cannot access it at the 35% discount offered by the people of Venezuela? How is it possible that we should have to carry a cost of an additional 4% of GDP in my own country simply because the rules that allow for one do not allow for the other? There must be transparency and there must be moral strategic leadership if we are to build the team to save the planet and to save and attain the SDGs in today's world. My friends, there are many other things that we can discuss. We support the United Nations accepting the responsibility for tax. Why? Because as quickly as the world has been able to find a mechanism for a global minimum corporate tax is as long as it has not found a mechanism to be able to inflate the financing opportunities available to developing countries. It cannot be. We know how to run fast in one set of circumstances when it suits one set of people, but yet we run very slow when it matters to billions of people and their access to life and livelihood. I do not want to prey on your time anymore, but suffice it to say that we have reached a point where we must give thanks for the progress made, but recommit ourselves. For the mission was never simply to make progress. The mission is to be able to save the planet and to give the people of the world the best opportunity for life that is necessary for them as human beings. To be able to save the biodiversity of this world. To be able to save the soils of this world that must nurture the food that we eat. To be able to allow us to have access to safe water. And if we don't change how we do our business, if we don't recognize that the Security Council needs to put itself in a position not to speak to climate change, but to protect us against the climate crisis, because it is as much of a crisis as the war in Ukraine or the wars in Africa or the instability and conflict elsewhere in the world. And if we don't take a proactive approach, then we truly shall be victims of it. I believe that reform is critical at this point. But what I believe doesn't matter. What matters is the action of each and every country in this. And will we always be in a position of flux? No. There is hope because human beings want to survive. But the problem is that those whose actions we most need may be so confident in their survival that they do not act early enough for us. And that is why I say, will we trod the road to be able to get to the gates only to find that we are too late and the gates have closed? It will be open for some, but it will be closed for many. You know, vision without action, Nelson Mandela told us, is just a dream. And action without vision just passes the time. But vision with action can change the world. Our citizens believe that we come into a talk shop when we come here. You and I know that it's potentially different. But it will only be different when those of you who have the responsibility to act on behalf of governments can ask your governments to come to the point of the decisions that we need to make to provide the funding, the tools, and the solidarity, rebuilding the trust that this debate calls for. And if we can do that, then we will not save all, but we can save the majority of people who are currently on the front line. We, for those of us who work on the SDGs, believe that as we work to save the planet, we have to redouble our efforts. And I leave you with one thing. The efforts to provide education and to save people from hunger and to remove gender discrimination are not simply the actions of governments. They have now equally to be the actions of individual citizens. But governments must help personalize those SDG goals for their citizens. If we can do that and we can continue to make the case for finance and if we can continue to stay focused on the climate crisis, then yes, we shall see a better world and we can shine the light on the future of many. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Minister for National Security and the Public Service, and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Seta Thavisin, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance of the Kingdom of Thailand. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Seta Thavisin, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance of the Kingdom of Thailand. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the delegation of Kingdom of Thailand, allow me to congratulate you, Mr. President, upon your election to preside over the Grand Assembly at its 78th session. Thailand has marked a new chapter in our democracy. I have only assumed an office for a few days ago, with the mandate of the people to strengthen democracy, institutions, and values in Thailand, and to uplift the well-being of the Thai people who have been through difficult times over the past several years. In our foreign relations, we will play a proactive and a constructive role in partnership with international communities. My government will also be reaching out to friends and partners all over the world to forge closer ties of partnership through commerce, investment, and trade agreements. Today, we meet at a time of multiple global challenges, including fragile global peace, declining human development, and the sustainability of our planet. These challenges require multilateralism and the spirit of international cooperation. And Thailand intends to work closely with all nations to meet these challenges head-on. Mr. President, it is the pursuit of peace that the United Nations was founded almost 8 decades ago. Now more than ever, we must continue to lay a strong foundation for the prosperity of our people by striving for sustainable peace. In this regard, Thailand welcomes the Secretary General's effort to establishing a new agenda for peace. We believe that this will spearhead the effort to revive multilateralism and enhance the UN role as a platform for the achievement of global peace. Thailand's vision for effective multilateralism is one that is inclusive, resilient, and result-oriented. In the world of increasing international conflicts, violence, and shifting global order, we reaffirm our commitment to maintaining peace and inclusivity. Thailand will pursue peaceful and collaborative relations with all members of the international community. We believe that long-lasting peace can be achieved if we can strengthen our multilateral relations that is based on mutual trust, understanding, and respect. Mr. President, sustainable peace and development are linked with respect for human rights, human dignity, and freedoms. To this end, the Thai government is working to advance equality and justice, especially for the most vulnerable and the marginalized. We plan to strengthen the rule of law and increase transparency within the government. We will ensure that the law is fair, strictly enforced, and applied to everyone equally. Thailand is the ASEAN candidate for Human Rights Council for the term 2025 to 2027. This reaffirms our sincere commitment to the advancement of human rights at home and abroad. We will ensure that Human Rights Council is well equipped to address new and emerging human rights challenges and contribute positively to the international community. Since its inception in 2002, Thailand's universal health coverage has ensured that all Thai citizens are entitled to essential preventive and curative health services at all life stages. In the coming years, we plan to further invest to upgrade our universal health coverage to improve the quality of the program and to give all patients the freedom to choose the healthcare provider best suited for them. This will ensure that access to high-quality health services will continue to be a universal right for all. If the recent global pandemic has taught us anything, it is that access to healthcare is one of the most essential services a government can provide to its people. Dealing with contagious disease is not one country's problem, but the world's shared responsibility. The global health architecture should be reformed and strengthened. We hope that the pandemic treaty can be established so that we can have a more resilient, responsive, and future-ready global public health infrastructures. Mr. President, Thailand welcomed the SDG Summit, which reaffirmed that sustainability is the only way forward to protect our planet and the well-being of our people. Yet, achieving the Sustainability Development Goals by most benchmarks still prove elusive, as only 12% of the goals are on track. This is why we must accelerate the implementation of the 2030 for Sustainable Development Agenda. To achieve the sustainable development, we must first take care of our people. My government plans to enact policies to stimulate job creation and provide financial support for low-income families and other vulnerable groups. This will help level the playing field and aid in the creation of a more just society. For many years, Thailand has been a strong advocate for a more balanced, people-centered, and sustainable path to growth. The Sufficiency Economy Philosophy, or SEP, our long-standing, locally driven development approach, has consistently been applied to promote balance of all respects. Building on the SEP is the Bio-Circular Green Economy model, which leverages science, technology, and innovation to advance economic growth while conserving the environment and ecosystems. These are not merely concepts, but they are being implemented in Thailand. For example, we have piloted the Sustainable Agronomy model, which reimagines the way farmers cultivate their lands and manage their water supply. This will not only reduce the impact on the environment, but also reduce vulnerability to climate change and enhance the well-being of farmers nationwide. Thailand is ready to reform regional and global partnerships for sustainable development, and including through South and South and triangular cooperation. As an ASEAN coordinator on sustainable development cooperation, we are committed to forging closer partnership among ASEAN countries and beyond to drive forward sustainable development and build resilience. Mr. President, this is in line with the Secretary General's statement that the era of global warming has ended and the era of global boiling point has arrived. The climate crisis is one of the most urgent threats that require our collective and immediate action. To this end, Thailand welcomed the Climate Ambition Summit to accelerate climate action that will mitigate the destructive impacts of the ongoing climate crisis. Together, we must devise the means to adapt and enhance climate resilience. As the global climate change crisis continues to worsen, so too will the issue of food insecurity and malnutrition. As a leading exporter of food and agricultural products, Thailand is suffering from the effect of global climate change and the effect of El Nino. To ensure food security for the world, we are working hard to improve our water management systems and farming techniques. We are doing our part to make sure that food security can become a reality. To achieve a more sustainable future, we must invest in the planet. Thailand is implementing green finance mechanism, including the issuance of sustainability-linked bonds and the Thailand Green Taxonomy to boost growth and investments in environmental and social projects, while contributing to the effort to address the challenge of climate change. To do our part, Thailand is determined to deliver on our pledge 40% of greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2040, carbon neutrality by 2050, and net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2065 by mainstreaming climate actions in all economic activities. Our national energy plan has integrated our climate targets by enhancing energy efficiency, increasing the share of renewable energy, making a model shift of transport to domestic electric vehicles production. Mr. President, the United Nations represents the common aspiration of the global community. We must redouble our efforts to ensure that the organization continues to be the best representation of our collective humanity and solidarity. As such, Thailand has great expectation for the Summit of the Future to foster a better future for all. Based on the spirit of multilateralism, with the UN at the helm, in the global push towards sustainable peace and sustainable development. Thailand believes now is the time to pursue our common agenda for peace, prosperity, and sustainability for all. We invite every nation to be more
原来好的益生菌真的可以帮助入睡。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌是国家认证 AB 克菲尔益生菌，含7种有身份证的专利活菌，能产生伽巴、色氨酸等助眠因子，难怪吃了更快入睡，也睡得更好。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌也是台湾市场上唯一添加克菲尔乳杆菌 M1 的产品。这是由台湾知名的大学季转，对季节敏感、调整体质的朋友真的是一大福音。还有这支还添加被称为超级食物的羽衣甘蓝萃取物， 不少研究都指出，十字花科蔬菜有助抗炎及防癌，像是羽衣甘蓝含有高量的叶黄素、贝塔胡萝卜素、维生素 K、维生素 C、叶酸等丰富营养素。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌专利制成，无塑化剂、无重金属、无人工添加物、无410项农药、无香料调味剂、无防腐剂、无色素，7大保证、7大认证，觉得好安心。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Feel Good，快点购下单！太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌。